Hello, my name is Jorb. I love gear. This video is mostly about Knobcon. Knobcon is a synthesizer convention that takes place just outside of Chicago. It has lectures, there are performances, a showroom filled with gear, new and old. And I've been going for several years. I really love it. And it gives me a good chance to talk about a lot of things, even though I know a video that's not really focused is bad for the algorithm and hard to get people interested in. But I'm still going to talk about it because I like it so much. And there weren't any like extremely fresh announcements that kind of fit into the things I cover or my wheelhouse. But there was plenty of stuff that I just hadn't gotten a proper chance to try yet, and certainly hadn't given you guys my impressions in a digestible manner. So I took the chance while I had all these shiny, nice things on the show floor, recorded some short clips with direct audio, and I'm going to spend the first part of this video, the bulk of it really, as a sort of first impressions catch-up. I hope that sounds interesting. Here's a little caveat for everything that you watch. I have just started working with a new camera. I had it just before I left. I filmed one thing, just the Donner video. If you haven't seen that, you should watch it. But I made the mistake of trying to shoot on my first day B-roll in 4K with 10-bit color because I was like, I want to see how much space this actually takes up and what it's like to actually edit it. But turns out the free version of DaVinci Resolve can't edit anything with 10-bit color. I didn't know that. Okay? So I tried to drag it in to edit it, and to me, it looked like it was just corrupted. So I deleted all my establishing shots, and I was frustrated at first, and I was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to re-record all this. But I realized I'm there mostly to hang out with people, not primarily to make a video. It's nice if I can get a video out, of the experience, and I do want to share it with you guys. But my main reason for being there is to experience it. So I didn't pressure myself to get those shots. Again, if they're gone, they're gone. And I'll try and piece together as much as I can from phone videos and camera shots and stuff, but I'm not upset about it. Live and learn, right? Anyway, the first synth that I want to talk about here, the PWM Malevolent. I had tried it at Superbooth in Berlin, and I remember liking it, but I certainly wasn't trying it with intention, if that makes sense. I certainly wasn't trying to get my thoughts together. What is it? Actually, it's a small semi-modular monosynth, sort of unassuming at first, but pretty quickly while I was using it, the name feels indicative of sort of an attitude, and I think it is quite fitting. The two oscillators support simultaneous waveforms, just on and off of a saw, a triangle, and a square wave, or a pulse wave, which we really like, and wave shaping affects all three of them, which I really like. The filter is a Salin key filter, which I had to ask to find out. That's 12 dB per octave, and it can be brash in that way because you get more high-end content that escapes. Just like the MS-10. The MS-10 is a 12 dB per octave filter, and that's part of why it gets to sound bold, is because you've got high harmonic content making it through when you otherwise wouldn't. Anyway, I also wrote down a built-in drive that gets really bold, on-panel modulation options that are appropriately attenuated, all in a package that I would call diminutive. And the Malevolent is a unique and interesting entry into a lot of that semi-modular realm. And there's a sort of ergonomic intentionality, I guess. There's intention to the ergonomics that I really appreciated. Having the modules drawn out in such a way that they include the patch points and the controls makes sense, as opposed to having all the patch points in a corner by themselves, and you have to really hunt for the ones that relate to the filter, the ones that relate to the oscillator. I like that idea. Plus, I like having all the patch bays in the back, behind the controls, behind the keyboard, because if you're working with a Eurorack system, that's going to be further away from you than the keyboard you're playing on. So it seems like such an obvious thing, seems like a small thing, but I think that shows a lot of intentionality in the way this thing was designed. So kudos for that, and kudos for the sound, especially, and that's the last thing I wrote. It sounds really cool. It's bold in the way I want a mono to be bold, so nice job, PWM, with that. Okay, next up, this is sort of a double feature. You guys know the Black Corporation stuff. Well, a bunch of that stuff was there at Knobcon, and if you don't know, they are small sort of module clones of legendary old gear. All the ones I know about are polysynths. I think all the ones they do make are polysynths. They're most known for Deckard's Dream, which is inspired by the Yamaha CS80. And I tried Deckard's Dream, and it was amazing, but I didn't get any footage. Of it. I just swung by when I was with a buddy, because there's other ones that I think are actually a little more interesting now that I wanted to talk about. First, and I believe the newest, it's called the Isenin.
Isenin.
I don't know if there's a Japanese meaning to that. I'm certainly pronouncing it wrong in some way, or if it's like a portmanteau, a few words in Japanese. It might even just be play on the word asinine, but either way, the Jupiter 8 is the inspiration, and it's really good. It feels great. Namely, the first thing that impressed me, the display. for understanding your splits, your layers, and your voice allocation, I found to be a really valuable addition. Scrolling through patches, of course, was easy, and it's just a fully hands-on, fader-laden control surface. That's all things that I really, really like. Does it sound like the original one? I have no idea, but it's analog. They give you almost exactly the same controls, and the labels are orange, so I don't know what else you could want. Anyway, and I'll do a grander conclusion, but I also tried the Kijimi, which I hadn't remembered. I had forgotten that it was the polycobalt, because that's such a weird, specific, very, very rare thing, but somebody there mentioned it. I was like, oh yes, this was a real thing that this is inspired by. But the polycobalt was like, I'm not sure specifics, okay? I think like less than 1,000 actually got made. And I'm bringing that up because I want to highlight how cool of a thing that is to clone. Even though Jupiter 8s are radically expensive, you could probably buy one right now. But there's a lot of moments in time where if you want to buy a polycobalt, you just can't. So I think it's a cool thing to clone from that perspective. And what I really liked about that, there's these rows of modulation buttons. And so they have a shared amount, and you pick a bunch of destinations on this row. That was really easy to see what was happening in a patch when you came to it from another one, and I really, really liked that. But anyway, I'm trying to do these quick because there's a massive caveat with the Black Corporation stuff. You can buy it assembled, and I know they aren't currently making all of them, and that is a deposit of $1,500. Then you have to wait for manufacturing, shipping from Japan, and then you get charged the rest. For all of them, I think, except for the Xerxes is $4,500, but all of them add up to $4,000 at your final charge, and I believe you still have to pay import taxes, depending on where you live. Okay, that's expensive and hard to get, right? There is also an option for DIY kits, but what you get from Black Corporation isn't a complete kit in what I would describe as a kit. You just get the PCBs and the enclosures. I don't even know if you get the knobs, but you don't get any of the components. You need to source thousands of components yourself and solder them into these boards. And so it's not an easy task for somebody to just sit down and do. I'm sure you've seen Molten Modular chipping away at Deckard's Dream. That's a really serious undertaking to commit to doing one DIY. Anyway, because it's so hard, some parts companies or parts suppliers have sold entire kits, but again, you have to make sure they're in stock, and that ends up still being about $3,000. So you save a little bit of money if you put it together yourself and you don't take the time to source the components, but it's a lot of assembly. All I'm really trying to say is they're really, really hard to get a hold of, right? So even if it's cool that they exist, so there you go, they're dope. I'm happy I tried them. I'm happy they exist, but it's not realistic for me. It's not realistic for most people to own one. And even if I myself am comfortable with soldering and DIY stuff like that, it's too much work. You know what I mean? I can't imagine spending $3,000 on something and then building it myself with all the fear of what if I got one component wrong in one voice and having then to troubleshoot. It's just a nightmare. So they're cool. I'm glad they exist. Me and many other people will never own them. Okay, this one will be kind of brief. I had never really tried the Argon 8. I'm more into virtual analog, and sure they say extended virtual analog, so I tried the Cobalt, primarily whenever they were next to each other. But I've been thinking about wavetables lately. I've been thinking about learning about things I don't know very well. And wavetables is one of those things, and that shit sounded really good. The wavetables that were in there were cool and interesting, sonically interesting, especially the way they were handled in the presets. And of course, I know that's the point of presets, to impress me, but they impressed me. And I like the built-in effects as well, which has always been important to me, especially in polysynths. The thing I want to highlight, I don't think a screen on its own is necessarily going to dramatically change the experience of using an instrument, but if it has good visuals, then it will make it a lot better. And the Cobalt 8 and the Argon 8 both do have really, really good visuals for your filter, for your envelopes, things like that. Being able to understand what you're changing just by looking at the screen is really, really, really valuable. And I didn't even know while I was on the floor that they just had an update. I didn't talk to anybody at that booth. I just walked up and started playing the keyboard. I didn't know that they just had an update with new effects, new filter types. I saw a vintage mode, a variable vintage mode, all that stuff, lots of cool stuff, but I didn't know. So I would have checked it out individually had I been prepared, but I was not. Anyway, I'm curious about it and the Cobalt both, but I'm glad I tried it, and it made me think about the toe jam in our own bass line, which is always a good thing for a keyboard. All right, last of the gear and the only groove box, I tried again the Polyend Play. If you remember, I think I mentioned it in my video about Superbooth that I tried it and I didn't feel like I really got it. And I think I've grown past that a little bit, in part because the demonstrator here at Knobcon, Mitch, is a friend of mine, and I was very comfortable asking questions and having him walk me through some demonstrations. So it really, really helped, because at Superbooth, when I tried it, it was mostly on my own, and it wasn't something that excited me, especially particularly yet, and so I wasn't ready to dive in on my own. But now, especially with a good demonstrator, I think some of the power is starting to really, really click. Seeing how straightforward it was to set up variation beyond that 16 steps. Specifically, there is something called a variation, which is an alternate 16 steps that you can use instead of what's in there. Patterns can be longer than 16 steps. How fast it was and how intuitive it was to do things like chance or randomness. All of that makes what you see on the grid at a specific moment much more than just those 16 steps. And that is really, really appealing to me. And it just sort of highlighted a sort of I guess, flexibility in the workflow that I wouldn't have given it credit for until I watched somebody show me that. And that's exciting for a groovebox, to have multiple ways to achieve what is sonically or rhythmically the same output is a cool idea. And even like watching Mitch do things like picking every row except for the kick drum and then manipulating the effects in the performance section just on what he had selected, so the kick didn't get filtered out or didn't have reverb on it that would really muddy the rest of it, made it seem sort of performative in a way that I wouldn't have highlighted until watching this happen right in front of me. So really what I want to know is if you guys have, or if you guys know any channels that are talking about using the play with external MIDI gear. That's a lot of what I would want to try. Link me, because I'm curious about that now. But anyway, the play has now piqued my interest. It's reminding me in part of how much I liked programming drum beats on a pad grid with the Deluge. And I'm not saying that they're similar devices, because they're really not, but the pad grid as an interface for manipulating rhythms is intuitive and powerful in a way that nothing I currently work with is. So there you go. That's it for the play. And that's actually all for the gear. So here comes the sappy stuff. Knobcon is run by a lot of people who work really, really hard, but the primary organizer and the guy we, the public, see as the face of it is a friend of mine, the elusive, the legendary Suit and Tie guy. And you might recognize his name from Eurorec modules or his Moog format work, but I want to specifically say, Suit and Tie guy, thank you for making this happen for so many years. Knobcon is special, and I'm happy to get to go, and I get to go because you helped put it on. So thank you very, very much for that. I'm so glad it exists, period. And yes, the gear is great, and that is a catalyst for meeting the people and interacting with the people, but it's more important to think about and to realize, like, this is an event where I can roll up and anyone I can talk to about what I really, really am passionate about. And my example of that, we were sitting outside on the first night and some guys were having a conversation about the Ensoniq Fismo. And where else can I sit down next to a stranger who's talking about the Fismo and be like, I am aware of the Fismo. I think that is cool. Things like that. It's amazing. A chance to hang out and talk about cool stuff. What else could anybody really, really ask for? So, and like specifically meeting people that I only know through the internet or I had only met at previous Knobcons. That was great. I met a few patrons, which thank you guys for saying hi. It is really, really flattering. To just shoot the shit over Discord for so long and then shake your hand and chat very, very casually at an event where we're both surrounded by the things we really, really care about. It's wonderful. So, and I did try to spend some time with other YouTubers. You've heard me say it before. It can feel really lonely to sort of understand this stuff and the algorithm and figuring out thumbnail strategy, how to work with companies to get gear, things, all that stuff. It's very hard to figure it out on your own. You're just trying shit over and over and seeing what works. So to be able to connect with other people and say, what have you tried for thumbnails and what it's like to work with this company and, have you had success interacting with your audience like this? All that stuff, being able to talk about that, to me is so, so refreshing. And it makes you realize that I'm not the only person going through this. I'm not the only person who's ever figured this out. So it's almost like here I am in the office, with my colleagues, and that feels really, really good. I talk to plenty of people who I know from the internet. I'm not going to name everybody. It was nice to meet all of you, I promise. But I want to highlight the guys I spent the most time with. Good buddy Noir at Blanc V. He helped me out with a video before he really knew who I was, when I was definitely not big enough for him to care, and that has really stuck with me. And anyway, he did me a huge, huge favor with that video, and I've wanted to thank him personally ever since. So, I picked him up at the airport, and even though my car broke down before I could drive him back to the airport, it was great to catch up with a friend from the internet and say thank you in person for a real favor. So I'm doing it again here in this video. If you watch this, thank you one final time for doing that voiceover so long ago. And I still owe you a beer. And the second, Shirko. If you guys know Shirko. I spent a lot of time with him. If you don't know him, he's on YouTube. He does electron stuff, sort of live techno stuff. He's been getting into modular. I really, really like his approach to a lot of things. But if you're into making hardware techno at all, you really, really need to check out his channel. But it was really, really great to connect with him. He told me he would be there, and I ran into him on the show floor, and then we hung out for a really, really long time, got lunch and stuff. He performed on Saturday night, and he really did an excellent job. It was all improvised modular techno. I think he really, really killed it. We spent a while on the show floor together, trading off recommendations, sort of, for what to go look at next and talk about next. It was a wonderful time. Plus, most importantly, watching him crack open beers without a bottle opener was like a MacGyver highlight reel. He really had some tricks. So Shirko, great to meet you, Eric. It was wonderful to meet you. Anyway, I could list off people that I met and connected with and all that stuff. You guys don't need to hear that. I just want to say that I'm proud to be part of this community. You guys are part of this community, and Knobcon makes it feel very real. It makes that community feel very, very real, and I think that makes it a very, very special weekend. It makes it a very, very special event. So there you go. Yeah, I have a little more in my outline. I don't need to say it. That's what I should end on. So feels right to stop there. Knobcon forever. Cheers. Thanks for watching. So long.